Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to share the outcome of successful negotiations with the government's largest union partners. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will recall that the government of Bermuda has 7 collective bargaining agreements and/or instruments that set out conditions of employment with 6 union partners or associations representing around 4,400 or so public officers. Most agreements expired in 2020 and included a survival provision. Negotiations commenced in 2022 with all partners except for the Bermuda Police Association. Mr. Speaker, the government modified its approach to these negotiations and moved away from a dedicated public sector negotiating team that consisted exclusively of private sector representatives to advance its interests and instead instituted a hybrid approach. That is, the government appointed private sector chairs to represent its interests and teamed them with senior technical officers who were not members of the union they were required to negotiate with under the direction of the chairs. Mr. Speaker, the hybrid approach addressed the issue of conflict of interest by vesting the leadership in the government-appointed private sector representatives and supported the position that public officers should not be charged with negotiating their own agreements. This revised approach also addressed the union's concerns that the private sector partners were not suitably conversant with the nuances of the public service and were therefore not sufficiently empowered to make operational decisions affecting the agreements. It was the union's view that the old PSNT model frustrated the process and lengthened the time at the table. Mr. Speaker, the union's views on this matter were particularly important, as these views were the outcome of consultation on negotiations process following the 2017 round of negotiations. This form of consultation and the government's commitment to enhance the process was pivotal in setting the initial tone for what proved to be a harmonious round of negotiations. Mr. Speaker, negotiations concluded in May 2023 with Bermuda Industrial Union and the Bermuda Public Services Union for General Staff, and in June 2023 with the Bermuda Union of Teachers. Mr. Speaker, honorable members will already be aware of the government's initial position on the thorny issue of pay. The budget statement recognized that public officers have gone 2 years without pay increases and continue to provide services under difficult circumstances. Further, that increases have been projected in fiscal years 2024 and 2024-25 and 2025-26 will be able to provide an uplift in salaries for public officers. Mr. Speaker, the budget further asserted, and I quote, "Salary increases for the near term will have to be funded by efficiency savings that exceed budget targets, and will request our public officers and our union partners to work with us to identify and to implement those savings." End quote. Mr. Speaker, as expected, our union partners argued passionately against the withholding of a cost of living increase based on the rising cost of living. The partners acknowledged the payroll tax reductions for officers falling within the lower end of the $48,000 to $96,000 tax band would benefit their members, resulting in an increase in their take-home pay. And the government accepted that those at the higher end of the band in other categories may not enjoy the same benefit. Further, Mr. Speaker, the government also accepted that successive years with no cost of living increases meant that government employees' salaries have not kept pace with inflation. Mr. Speaker, the government committed in good faith bargaining, and following a fulsome review and many exchanges, the parties reached a wages and salaries agreement, first with the Bermuda Industrial Union, followed by the Bermuda Public Services Union, and ultimately the Bermuda Union of Teachers. Mr. Speaker, while the conditions associated with each agreement may vary, I am pleased to report to this Honorable House the principal wage and salaries agreement resulted in the following. Fiscal year 2020-2021, 0% increase. Fiscal year 2021-2022, 0% increase. 2022-2023, a 2.25% increase, plus a $700 ex gratia payment, and for the current fiscal year 2023-2024, a 2.25% increase. Mr. Speaker, in an environment where the global trend during the period of these extended negotiations saw strikes and other forms of industrial action all around this world, this government is pleased that we're able to remain at the table and reach a compromise position that was ultimately accepted by all parties void of any form of industrial action. Mr. Speaker, this government is proud of the strong bond that we've established with our union partners. one that sees us meet on a quarterly basis under the banner of the Bermuda Trade Union Congress to address common issues affecting government employment and wider economic issues. A relationship where sometimes we agree to disagree, but work through matters in the best interest of Bermuda, as evidenced with the latest round of negotiations. Mr. Speaker, collective bargaining remains a work in progress with the Bermuda Public Service Unions for Principals and the Fire Service Association. I can report that negotiations between the Government of Bermuda and the Prison Officers Association has been referred to the Department of Labor for conciliation. Mr. Speaker, during this month of June, government employees have been awarded their negotiated uplift, and a payment schedule has been set out that will see the employees receive their back pay prior to the end of July 2023. In fact, the Bermuda Industrial Union members have already received their emoluments. Mr. Speaker, the total cost of the government in back pay, the ex gratia payment, and the increases for employees for this fiscal year, represented by the three unions, is estimated to be in the region of $19.4 million. That is $4.4 million total over the time period for BIU members, $13.1 million over the time period for BPSU member employees, and $1.9 million for BUT member employees. Identifying the funds to support the new agreement has been a challenge. However, the government is determined to ensure that the cost of living increase commitment falls within the existing budget allocation for fiscal year 2023-2024. Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to thank our public sector negotiating team chairs, Ms. Josine Harmon, Mr. Stephen Todd, Mr. Richard James, and latterly Mr. Andrew Parsons, who recently replaced Mr. James, to continue with those uniformed officer negotiations that remain in progress. Additionally, thanks extended to those senior officers who accepted the challenge of adding the negotiations function to their already taxing workload. The countless hours of preparation and negotiations requires a significant commitment, and so I'll be remiss if I did not recognize their contributions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.